I thought Lisa liked me, and then she had me speak after the future First Lady of Florida, and that's no longer true, Lisa, because that's a tough act to follow, Ms. Donalds. It's going to be great to come back to Florida when, in fact, you're in Tallahassee. I learned, this is why I love coming to ALEC. In the course of the last hour and a half since I got here, I've learned about 20 different things that I didn't know, because everybody in this room is an expert about something, and I always ask questions about everything. Let me start, though. I learned about Matt Commons, who I may embarrass now. State Representative Matt Commons, Indiana. Where are you, Matt? Over there. He is a veteran of our Afghan war. He's a wounded warrior, and he is serving on your Veterans Affairs Committee. So could he and every other veteran please stand up? I stand in line with Matt and Leah Beebe, and we were talking about various states and the policies that they adopt for their veterans, for their disabled veterans, both education tax credits, property tax relief, the sorts of things that you never hear about, but that states do better than the federal government. Then I sit down next to Erica, and I learn all about the global goal, which is every dollar that a parent spends on education, they should be able to get to direct. And I think that is a fabulous policy goal, and I will be talking to people throughout the day. In fact, these are my 2 easiest days of broadcast of the year. There are 15 segments in a 3-hour broadcast show. We're on the Salem News Channel, Salem Radio Network, a few hundred stations across the country, and it's easy because I have to do very little preparation. All the 12 guests show up, and they're loaded and ready for bear to talk about what's going on in their state. And usually there's a lot to talk about. Now, I am experienced in the states. I grew up in Ohio, but I moved immediately after that to California, after Massachusetts, after Michigan, then to Virginia, then to New York. All I've done is live in blue states. So all I want to do is get to a red state eventually. Ohio was blue when I grew up, now it's red. I want to get to a red state where they're doing red things, or at least a state that's in transition. Lisa and Jonathan and I, we all live in poor old Virginia, where we had a great governor and great momentum, and we've gone way backwards in a hurry, but we'll turn that around, I hope. I hope that the example that is set by states that gain population, gain wealth, gain jobs, gain future is enough to drive other states to eventually capitulate to common sense. That's my goal, is to make states capitulate to common sense. Now, in my other life, I am a law professor. And I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes telling you the good news, because I have to redo. Every year I've been teaching since 1995, constitutional law. And I'm not going to ask the lawyers to stand up. You might not get out of here. They're not really popular. I know there are a bunch of lawyers here. If you remember law school, the worst part of constitutional law is the 11th Amendment about when you can sue a state, and the Dormant Commerce Clause about when the federal government gets to push around states and when states can push back. In the last 5 years at the United States Supreme Court, since the court went to an originalist majority, state after state wins at least once a year. This past year, in Little Hecox in Idaho, from Idaho, and West Virginia versus BPJ, states were confirmed in their authority over Scholastic High School statute, rules, and regulations. That's a big win for the states. It's a big win for common sense in America. 2 years ago, in Oklahoma versus EPA, that allowed states to sue the federal government in the circuit jurisdiction that is closest to them. So if the federal government is messing with you in Oklahoma, you can sue in the circuit closest to or including Oklahoma. If they're messing with you in Ohio or Illinois or Indiana, you can go to the 6th or the 7th Circuit and sue there. You don't have to go to the District of Columbia. You don't have to deal with the most, not maybe the most, at least equal to the most liberal jurisdiction in America. You get to sue them in the right place. 3 years ago, United States versus Scrimetti. That's about health care for minors who are experiencing gender dysphoria. Tennessee decided it would legislate in that area, and the Supreme Court upheld its right to legislate in that area. Go back another year, Loper-Bright versus Raimondo. That's about when the federal government can come in and screw your small businesses by virtue of simply dictating via federal regulation what's in their best interest. And the granddaddy of them all, which is skipping a year, West Virginia versus EPA, That is the biggest one that pushed the EPA back on its heels. Now, I have in the last month had on both EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin for a half-hour conversation about what they're doing, and Secretary of the Interior Doug Burgum. What they're both trying to do is make you more empowered to do what you know is best for your states. Whether it is in terms of controlling your clean air and your clean water, you know better than the states. Whether it's in terms of controlling your natural resources or what is or isn't an endangered species, they know that you know what is best for your states. And they're committed to it. In fact, I think the next 2 years, no matter what happens in the midterms, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second, no matter what happens in the midterm, this is the best time ever in my 31 years of teaching common law to be a state legislator. Because when you push back, when you pass laws that reflect the values and the goals of your states, the federal courts are instructed to honor the choices of the states. I also come to ALEC because my information is always out of date. In fact, today I checked on ChatGPT because I wanted to find out how many states had already joined in Senator Cruz and Donald Trump's initiative that I learned that Ms. Donalds was also involved in to get the ability of states to have a $1,700 tax credit. ChatGPT thinks it's 27. Lisa just told me it's 30. So you're ahead of ChatGPT, Lisa Nelson, and that is a big deal. Now, I also heard up here, and I'm going to be asking a lot of my guests, the biggest story of the news cycle, and I always have to know what the story of the news cycle is of course the war in Iran, but the second biggest story in the news cycle is voting integrity in New Jersey. Now, 3 years ago, is Robert here? There you are. 3 years ago, Bob Oth and I sat in the Newark airport. I stayed overnight. He went home and came back because thunderstorms had collided with my plans to move here, to come down here for 2 days. And Bob and I were talking about New Jersey and what a lost and hopeless case it was. And he's in there fighting it off. Good to see you, Robert. And we exchange emails every now and then. Lee Abebe is from New Jersey. He always tells me New Jersey isn't lost. But you watch enough Sopranos and you think it's lost. And I found yesterday, I was amazed. Mickey Sherrill, one of the moderate Democrats who's not moderate, was obliged by the facts to stand up and say, oops, 6,600 migrants to this state were also issued not just their driver's license, but were registered to vote, and at least 600 of them voted. Now, it doesn't mean material fraud. It just means, as I have written books about, there is fraud in every election, every single election. 2004, I wrote the book, If It's Not Close, They Can't Cheat. Fraud is in the DNA of one of our great parties. We're a nonpartisan organization. I won't tell you which one. Chicago, Boston, Kansas City, there are machines. And there is fraud in California. Now, I lived almost 30 years of my 70 in the Golden State. And whereas California has turned out 16 consecutive years of one-party rule under very left-wing governors Jerry Brown and Gavin Newsom, Florida keeps winning the lotto. And you go from Jeb Bush to Rick Scott to Ron DeSantis, and now you're going to Byron Donalds. That's not even fair to a California. Now, we've moved to Virginia to the Beltway. I thought I'd hit a home run with Glenn Youngkin, and we did. But now we got to deal with Abigail Spanberger. Don't believe when people present themselves as moderate. They're not moderates. They are there to actually do the will of what is California's example. California is now a mess. I raised 3 kids with my wife in wonderful California, and we had great schools. Their out-migration is real, and it's for a reason. My great schools are no longer great schools. My property taxes are no longer capped as they were when I first moved there. The transportation is no longer what it is. The beach is still wonderful, but there are beaches everywhere. I just want to encourage you to continue to study down, whether it's veterans benefits, whether it's education reform, whether it's voter cleanup rolls, whatever it is that you're working on. What we learn every 2 days, I come here every year, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, I learned that there are smart people, incredibly dedicated, doing the very difficult business of actually coming up with the lines and the paragraphs that make a change. Keep those red states getting redder. Let's turn around some of our blue friends and make them at least purple. And Erica Donalds, I sure look forward to your story in about 3 years from now. Thank you very much for having me, ALEC.